practicing medicine truly is an art form. Certainly being an innovator and founder is definitely an art form. And there's really no defined path for anybody who goes on these journeys. And for me, it was something where I was completely off the path of traditional medicine, and certainly venturing into a place where I didn't have as much experience. But in some ways that can be valuable because you're not afraid to make mistakes. You're really willing to take risks that can be valuable in the long run. And you're able to kind of go through something, understand if it doesn't work, we're going to pivot and move on to the next thing without getting kind of too caught up in the momentum and expectations that maybe someone has if they've been in the seeped in the kind of entrepreneurial and business world for a long time.
Welcome to the Real Estate Mogul MD podcast. Thanks for tuning in and taking control of your financial future. This is a show where we not only motivate and inspire, we give you actionable real-world experience to help you live life by design. You'll hear journeys and stories from other physicians, investors, coaches, consultants, and entrepreneurs. And now, here's your host, Brett Riggins. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Liz Clayborne, an ER physician, innovator, and CEO and co-founder of NasaClip. It's a hands-free nosebleed rescue device. She raised over $3.75 million for her company and turned an ER frustration into a market-changing medical device. We're diving into her journey from physician to entrepreneur, raising capital, and the mindset needed to succeed. Here we go. Liz, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here.
And that's awesome. And always thinking, like, every time we start a show, start a conversation, like, oh, how are you doing? Like small talk. We've already talked about this.
Yes.
So the pre-roll thing, which is very interesting for a lot of people who may have not been on podcasts, there's a lot of conversation that happens before and after, and very cool things can be discussed before and after. Today, we were talking about kids and snow time. We're shooting this here in the beginning of March, and the two of us are ready for spring, aren't we?
Absolutely. I cannot wait. I need the longer days, the sunshine, and the warmth.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Liz, let's jump into this and get started just by telling the listeners just a little bit about your incredible journey. What inspired you to move from emergency medicine to medical innovation?
Well, it's an interesting journey because it wasn't anything that I did necessarily intentionally. So I'm a board certified emergency physician, was an academic doc at the University of Maryland, and kind of happily going along my academic emergency medicine path. But when I was a resident, before I became a faculty member and I trained at GW, I was really struck by the number of people who showed up to the ER for nosebleeds. And if you talk to any ER doc, you're going to hear them kind of moan and groan when it comes to epistaxis or nosebleeds, because it's a lower acuity problem, but one of the more cumbersome and difficult things that we take care of. And believe it or not, we see 500,000 ER visits a year for nosebleeds.
Wow.
Yes. And I just couldn't believe people would show up to see me and wait hours over such a simple problem. But I found a lot of people tend to mismanage their nosebleeds and often do things that are not helpful, like putting their head backwards instead of forwards, or pinching their nasal bridge instead of down over their nostrils. And most importantly, they don't hold constant pressure. You need like 10 to 20 minutes of uninterrupted pressure to stop a nosebleed. Sounds simple. Nobody does it. Really hard to pinch your nose. And then nosebleeds are actually really common in younger kids, 2 to 10, older adults, 55 to 80, who might be on blood thinners. So it's really like the least likely population to manage it well. So I think they panic and they show up to the ER and they're like, you must see me immediately because this is, a nosebleed emergency. I'm bleeding. But for us, we're like, you didn't just get shot. You're not having a stroke. So you have to wait.
Yeah.
So my frustration as an ER doc helped me kind of create this new nosebleed treatment device called NasaClip that provides external pressure with intranasal sponges that can be medicated, sized for both adults and kids. And it's kind of like the Band-Aid of nosebleeds. So it sat on the back burner for a long time, but it was literally that I kept seeing nosebleed patients all the time in my clinical work. And I was like, man, I've really just got to get this thing to market. So I finally kind of buckled down in 2020, started fundraising. And after raising our first about $1 million in capital, we were able to enter the market in late 2023. And now we've been in the market over a year, raised about 3.75 million for the company.
Wow.
And it's taken off in ways that I could have never imagined. So now I'm a full-time CEO, startup founder. And it's been a really exciting journey and something that I often tell physicians to consider early in their careers as like a way to always look for those little things that might be annoying you that actually might be the best next innovation in medicine that both helps bounce your career and also improve the lives of patients.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I talk about this a lot on the show, Liz, that little 1-degree pivot. Each of us have our own stack of unique experiences and opportunities. And when you can see that, and you have the ability to work through the stress and the strain and life and parents, like all this stuff, because we're presented with so many opportunities. It's just those moments of seeing that opportunity in a perspective of everything's possible. Everything's been given to us and everything is possible. So that's great. Hey, we've got this idea. How does it go into a fully developed product? Like, how did you, as an ER doc, how do you go, okay, I need to make a prototype? How in the world, if everybody goes to NasaClip.com, right? That's the website?
Correct. NasaClip.
And they see this thing. How in the world? I mean, what did the first one look like?
Oh my gosh, the little chunky 3D printed, like, them trying to capture what was in my brain.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. We did keep all of our early prototypes. So I have like them all the way up to like, now we have a new reusable version that's getting ready to launch on Amazon, and it just continues to look better and better. I mean, I'm sort of like any innovation. Like if you look at the first iPhone versus what they have now. So in the beginning, I had no idea what I was doing. Mind you, I have no business background, right? I don't have an MBA. It was all kind of learning by fire, trial and error. And what I did in the very beginning when I was a resident is I entered the GW business plan competition because we had an innovation center. And one of my attendings at the time was like, you should do this. And so that was what really forced me to, first of all, look at, do I have good product market fit? Is this something, if I do make it, that people will pay for? Who's going to pay for it? Like, where does it have traction? And so I had to kind of think about the business model really early on. And I also did the NSF I-Core, the innovation course. And that was a great opportunity to interview people on the ground level, parents, trainers, coaches, physicians, pharmacists, and ask them like, well, how do you treat a nosebleed? Why do you do that? Who told you to do that? And I found a lot of people were getting their information from healthcare professionals or trusted family members, but a lot of them still were doing the wrong thing. So I recognized that there was not only just a market for me in the hospital urgent care setting, but this was a huge problem for school nurses, trainers, and then a lot of like event and travel medicine. So airlines, cruises, we're actually in all Disney cruise ships and parks. But to get there, I was like, okay, great. I have a market. I have an idea, but like, how am I going to make it? So fortunately, when I moved to my faculty position with University of Maryland, their Office of Technology Transfer put me in touch with a couple of engineering firms that do this. They basically prototype ideas. And we did a lot of iterative process where we kind of had something where I told them I think it should look like what kayakers wear on their nose to prevent water from going up their nose. And I gave them actually an example of that. They dissected it, kind of modified it to what I needed with the sponges on the base and like being able to adjust the pressure to make it as tight as they need without it being too tight. And then we just kept iterating on that development, working out the size for the pediatric patients, and then working with materials that made it more and more comfortable, more ergonomic, and easier to use. So it was a long process. It did require quite a bit of capital, and I still am not happy. And I tell a lot of founders that at a certain point, you just have to pull the trigger and say, we're going to market, like, especially for our type A physician types. Yeah. You could probably spend forever trying to get it perfect, and you're never going to be 100% happy, but you get really valuable feedback once you're in the market. And so you're never going to be able to anticipate everything. So at a certain point, you have to be like, you know what, we're going to dive in and see what feedback we have. And with an understanding that you'll always be kind of improving the device as you go along.
Yeah. And it's such an interesting journey too, because you have an idea and there's so many people want to work with you when you're paying them. I mean, everybody just wants that money and wants that opportunity, so it's crazy. And as an entrepreneur, it's like, okay, I can do this. But you're right. It's just like being an artist or a musician. And by the way, I love that picture behind you. So for the listeners, Liz has this picture of a stethoscope that's got the cable, the cord, like twisted into a treble clef.
Yes. Like the art of medicine. And then there's like a lot of, loud paint coming out of the end of the stethoscope. So yeah, I mean, I think that Practicing medicine truly is an art form. Certainly being an innovator and founder is definitely an art form. And there's really no defined path for anybody who goes on these journeys. And for me, it was something where I was completely off the path of traditional medicine, and certainly venturing into a place where I didn't have as much experience. But in some ways that can be valuable because you're not afraid to make mistakes. You're really willing to take risks that can be valuable in the long run. And you're able to kind of go through something, understand if it doesn't work, we're going to pivot and move on to the next thing without getting kind of too caught up in the momentum and expectations that maybe someone has if they've been in the seeped in the kind of entrepreneurial and business world for a long time. So in many regards, I think I was told that emergency physicians in particular are great startup founders because we're really used to doing with a lot of what startup founders have to deal with, which is being resource poor, which is what we deal with in the ER, having utter chaos going on at all times, being a really good read of people, which you need to be as any doc, right? But especially in the ER when we have short time and we need to kind of go into a patient room, decide what's going on, really infer, is this a sick or not sick patient and what needs to be done? And then also kind of being able to ride those highs and lows without getting too off kilter. And those are all things that are where I was very prepared and used to doing as an ER doc. And I think really set me up for success as being a startup founder.
Yeah. And the art piece of it too, just like being a musician, when you're working towards this direction, you need to know when you can always work on the painting, the drawing, the recording. You can work on it for the rest of your life. And there's got to be a point where it's like, boom, this is done.
Yes.
And then it goes to press, it goes to print, it goes to the listeners, the viewers. And that idea of you mentioned the words resource poor. I heard, I think it was Built to Serve, a book that I was listening to, and mentioned that for entrepreneurs, it's not about having resources. It's about being resourceful. And it's this idea of what can I use that I have in order to do what I need to do. And I'm sure you do this all the time in the ER and as an entrepreneur the same way, because when you're creating these, you're converting an idea into a tangible thing. Like I say, everybody wants your money. Everybody's happy to work with you, designers, engineers, manufacturers, all of this stuff. But the true trick is, how can I do this without spending any money? When can I spend money? And then what does that look like for return? And if you're raising capital, there's probably a lot of business backing that goes into that says, hey, this is going to turn. So that point when you said, hey, this drawing is done, it's going out, and you start creating revenue. What was that like for you, the first sale that you made?
Oh, I kept the check, actually. Yeah. I was going to frame it. We rolled out at all express care urgent cares in the kind of mid-Atlantic region. And it was our first order. And I was really excited, really backed by one of our primary investors, Dr. Maurice Reed. And I've had a lot of support, by the way, from my physician community. They were all my very early investors, and we have a We Funder round going on right now. And so all my doc friends who didn't invest early are jumping on the bandwagon now because they're like, man, Liz, I should have got into those rounds when, your valuation was lowered and now we see you're skyrocketing. But it felt so good because, like you said, it was a long journey and it took a lot of years. A lot of times people see, successes in the startup space and they think it happened overnight. I mean, I thought of this idea back in 2015 when I was a resident, really just sat on it for the first 5 years, worked on getting a couple of our patents done. And then it wasn't until 2020, after I went through craziness in the pandemic, that I did my first accelerator program and started to raise money. And like the grueling process of having to raise capital, which is really necessary for something, for a company when you're doing a physical product like mine, was a really long haul. So when we got that website live and we started selling product and had our first, $20,000 check to, stock these group of ERs and urgent care centers, I was super proud. And I also was proud because, I had a lot of fellow physicians who were like, oh man, I hate epistaxis or I hate nosebleeds. And I'm so glad I have this very useful tool to make it easier for me to manage these patients. And I continue to get that feedback. That's what makes me feel really good, is when I either get an actual customer or a patient who who's like, this has been a big pain point for me and your solution is making my life easier. Or I feel from my fellow physicians, they're like, man, that's such a good idea. I mean, it makes so much sense. I can't believe no one thought of this before. Good for you. We're really proud of you. And that really just kind of makes me beam a little bit in the moment, because it was something where I think a lot of docs might have ideas, but don't really know how to like get past that idea stage and take it to fruition. And for me, I stumbled through the process, but I made it happen.
And if you had kind of like steps 1, 2, 3, super basic, super simple for that physician that's listening that has that idea, what would they be?
Yeah, I get asked this a lot. I'm always the person that residents come in at and say, hey, like, what should I do about this? So the first thing is you need to make sure it's unique and novel and protect your IP, your intellectual property. So that means you need to do a patent search. And if you're really seeing that there's something like that, you're going to probably have to come up with a little bit of the dough needed to protect that, because in the beginning, the only value your company will have is the intellectual property. The second is what I mentioned with my experience doing the iCore. You need to make sure you have good product market fit. So before you pour your blood, sweat, and tears into something, take the time to really explore your market, do customer discovery, and make sure that you have something that once it gets to market, somebody's going to actually pay for. Because a lot of times it may seem like a great idea to you, but if you haven't really done the work to validate that market, it won't work well. And then I would say outside of that, the third thing you need to do is start understanding what resources and team members you're going to need to bring that idea to fruition. For me, I had a co-founder who was actually an undergrad at the time I was in residency, that then went on to doing a lot of work in the startup space, had worked with a couple of companies that had very successful businesses and potential exits. And that really gave me the lift I needed in having someone who understood the business side of a startup, whereas I kind of was the person who was really driving the innovation and the ideas. You need someone who's still going to drive the business. And if you don't have that or you can't learn it, then you got to fill those gaps. So know where the gaps are on your team and bring that in. And that also means obviously the engineering, everything else that you have, and pick strong team members. I listened to a really awesome podcast that I would recommend to all your listeners called Founders by David Sindra, and it really goes through the biographies and autobiographies of really successful entrepreneurs and founders throughout history and even present day. And a lot of times you'll hear them talk about in the beginning, you got to have an A team. You got to have like the best people you can put around you. And that was certainly very integral to my success.
Mm-hmm. And the challenge is, how do you pay the A team?
I hear you.
And when that happens, how that happens, it all makes sense. Hey, Liz, you mentioned iCore. What is iCore?
So iCore, or Innovation Core, is something funded by the National Science Foundation. So especially if you're in like life science med tech, this is something that you can apply for. They do both local and national programs and if you do the national program, by the way, you do get a grant. You get a $50,000 grant to support this work, where they will support you in building out your business plan. And you also do quite a bit of customer discovery. So it's really a federal program that's intended to foster and support innovators in the life science med tech space. And you come together with a group of other founders, do all of this kind of customer discovery, present it to each other, and they have really great experts in the field that can help give you feedback and provide next steps. It also is, I think, a feeder program to the SBIR grants, the Small Business Innovation Grants. And I did end up applying to an NSF SBIR Phase 1 grant. So in addition to the dilutive capital that I raised, I had a $256,000 non-dilutive grant, which helped me to develop the pediatric version of my device. And I just applied for another SBIR grant from NIH this time, because we're looking at iterating the device into a intranasal drug delivery platform. So this is a $2.4 million grant that I'm going after that, I initially designed NasaClip to help deploy medicines in the nose that are helpful in the setting of nosebleeds. But I was like, oh, it's actually great for deploying any intranasal drug, like Narcan or naloxone, for example. So that's what we're studying, is how to make the device better than maybe nasal spray because of its sponges that maintain contact with the mucosa and putting that system under pressure. And you can use those non-dilutive grant dollars from the government to, de-risk your device before you raise capital. And I found that that's been really, really helpful. And one of the ways that you can really prime yourself for applying for one of those grants is by doing the iCore program beforehand.
Interesting. And then I think I heard you say IDF as well. What's IDF mean?
IDF.
Yeah, I
Did
thought
I?
I may have misheard you. Yeah. Which I always like to slow down and try to break the acronyms down too. So
Absolutely, because we kind of roll through them. I don't
yeah,
know IDF, but I said that. So SBIR is a Small Business
yeah,
Innovation Research, and then there's just like the different institutes that you can apply for. So you can apply for grants from those from DoD, from NIH, as well as the NSF, the National Science Foundation.
nice. So it sounds like a lot of time. And on top of this, you're still a ER doc.
That's right. I still practice clinically.
And you're a mom.
I am. I'm a mom. I'm a single mom, actually. I also
Oh
went through a
wow.
divorce while I built this
Oh
company.
wow.
So, I think that it's one of the things I bring up and I share publicly because I want people to be aware that life just lifes, while you're doing
Yeah.
these other things. And oftentimes it's that kind of resilience that I think can make you a really great founder. But I have a 4 and 6 year old. And I'm like, full-time mom. I still work about 5 shifts a month in the ER, which is maxing me out currently. I'm hoping to kind of wind that down to 2 to 3, which would be more of a sweet spot for me. But it is a nice way that helped to supplement my income, while I really wasn't able to pay myself as a full-time CEO. And so in
Mhm.
many ways, it's helpful, especially if you have a medical career where you have shift work. And also my best ideas, come from having my clinical work. And I continue to use the device as a physician, which is, the
Right.
ultimate yes,
I could see
right?
Liz. I could see Liz in the ER room now, just waiting for that person to come in with a
Yeah, yeah. Now
nosebleed,
I'm
right?
like excited when I see a
Yeah.
nosebleed. I'm like, yes, we're going to use NasaClip.
That's awesome. Uh, so how do speaking of all this stuff going on, how do you juggle that? How do you balance all of these roles? And I mean, I know it takes a toll on the family. It takes a toll on you personally. How do you balance all of this stuff?
Yeah, I'm asked about that a lot. And I really do think it's important because, in many regards, this is a marathon, not a sprint. I mentioned like how long it takes a lot of founders to really be successful. And you only hear about the story once they've passed that, threshold of an exit or a big success story. And you don't know all the backstory and the long hours and the grueling years of kind of up and downs that are required to get to that point. So for me, I try to be. First of all, I'm not afraid to ask for help. So there's a lot of things in my personal life that make it possible for me to do this. I have a live-in nanny. I have a mom that's really active with her grandkids. I have 2 of my 3 sisters in the DC area. We really lean on each other. And then I also look for support from, the ecosystem, especially in Maryland, which has been really focused in, I think, investing in the startup and med device ecosystem. I have other med tech founders who I talk to. I have groups, especially for female founders, because we have a unique set of stressors and challenges, especially when it comes to fundraising. And, I make sure that I have fun while I'm working. So a lot of times when I talk to my residents, one of the things I really emphasize to them is it's really hard to be successful if you're not happy.
Mhm.
And so you really need to make sure that you're taking care of your personal wellness, whatever that is. If it's living in a place that's warmer because that makes you happier, if it's being closer to your family, if it's making time for activities that kind of fill up your cup, you have to do that because it is going to be harder and longer for you to get to where you're going if you're miserable while you do it. And so I want to be able to enjoy my life and not only show my 2 daughters that I'm this, brilliant, successful physician innovator, but that I also was a happy person, a mom that loved spending time with them, and that I was enjoying my life along that journey and that grind, towards the destination that I want, which is a successful exit for NasaClip.
That's awesome. And sharing that is really important too. So everybody can hear. It's not all sunshine and rainbows, I like to say. Overnight successes usually take about 10, 20 years for that to come to fruition. I also see, we have this much action in entrepreneurship in our careers. Real estate's typically something that's kind of like it's not even in the thought, right? Tell me about real estate. What does real estate mean to you?
Well, interestingly, I always looked at real estate as one of the few things outside of investing in your 401k that people looked at as a tool for building wealth. And for me, it's been really interesting to share with people that outside of real estate, there are these other opportunities for you to invest and diversify your portfolios, which actually includes, putting money into a startup found company like mine. So I do a lot of educating, especially in the physician community about, I think that having something outside of just your retirement that you're investing in is important. Real estate is a great vehicle for you to do that. And a lot of times we are fortunately usually equipped with the financial backing to invest in real estate in a meaningful way that can be really substantial for your children. But then also to take that further step to be that you can be an angel investor. Because I think a lot of people think about angel investing as only something that, multimillionaires can do. And I'm like, no, you can be an angel investor right now. In fact, you guys, for my plug, you can go to wefunder.com/NasaClip and invest as little as $100 for equity in my company now. And, I would definitely encourage everyone to check that out and also look at all of the opportunities. And I love when I speak to physicians that are kind of being mindful of how you build wealth. And that's one of the reasons I love, following podcasts like yours that show me what I should be doing with my money so I can build my wealth.
That's awesome. So what's next for NasaClip?
So we are getting ready to launch on Amazon in the next couple of weeks, which is also a huge milestone for me, right?
Congratulations.
Thank you. We have a reusable version of our device I mentioned where the sponges are replaceable. That should be coming out in March. And then we're really working on building our revenue this year. And then in addition to that, I mentioned we just submitted a grant to NIH to look at NasaClip as a drug delivery platform. So, I think that's going to be a necessary and really exciting step towards the $1 billion exit that I want. And, outside of that, I think you can look to see me as a future physician innovator that's going to be a well-known example to other, mom docs, women of color in this space, and especially just, those founders who did not necessarily think that their career involved anything related to entrepreneurship, but then just blossomed when they got into that lane. And I want my story to really be inspirational to anyone who might be interested in this and understanding that if you believe in yourself and you have the hustle and grind in you, you can make it and you can be really successful. And that's really what I hope that my story can serve to others.
Resilience. So important. For physicians thinking about launching a business, what's the one thing they should start doing today?
So I think that you have to first make sure that you're going to create the time and understand that it will not always be a back burner project. Like at some point, if you're really serious about this, start putting the kind of safeguards in place so that you can have time for that transition, that pivot into being an entrepreneur. And it can be gradual, right? Because it's hard to just say like, I'm jumping in, with 2 feet in the deep end and I'm just completely giving up medicine. A lot of us don't want to do that. We trained our whole lives to be physicians. And I'm here to say you don't have to do that. You can do it gradually, but you have to start making really definitive decisions that like, this is something that I think can work. I believe in myself. And so I'm going to take really intentional steps to make that happen, carve out the time to work on the project, dedicate the funds that I need to do that. And, give yourself a timeline for you to be able to achieve those self and hold yourself to that so that it can be a reality.
That is amazing advice, spoken from somebody who's been through this process already. So Dr. Clayborne, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much. And we've got the two websites. I'll put both of them in the description, but one is for more information on NasaClip. It also has that link to the WeFunder page, but please let us know those websites one more time.
Sure.
So that the listeners can get there.
Thanks, Brett. I appreciate that. If you're interested in buying NasaClip, learning more, or getting it in your institutions, you can go to NasaClip.com, NasaClip.com. And then if you're interested in investing, you can go to wefunder.com, WEFUNDER.com/NasaClip.
Nice. And that'll be in the description. And until next time, we'll have you on when you hit that $1 billion exit. How about that?
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Thanks again for your time today, Liz.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely inspiring conversation today with Dr. Clayborne. Man, there's so much there. And I know there's so many listeners out there that has that idea, that have that little opportunity for that 1 degree pivot. Here are some notes I threw in the bucket today. Entrepreneurship starts with solving a problem. You don't need an MBA to build a business. Raising capital takes persistence, strategy, and the right network. Physicians can leverage their skills in innovation, business, and even real estate to build financial freedom. If you want to support NasaClip, visit NasaClip.com. That's NasaClip.com, or invest in their WeFunder campaign at wefunder.com/NasaClip. That's WEFUNDER.com/NasaClip. What an amazing story. So exciting. Best wishes to Liz and the journey, and best wishes to you. Take that idea out of your head, start taking action. If you have any need for resources, like I say, everybody, I don't know everything, but man, I love helping where I can. You can shoot us an email, reach out to us, and keep listening. This is the Real Estate Mogul MD.